Okay, Spider fans, it is time to start believing the hype and getting on the hype train for Spider-Man No Way Home. And even though Sony suck at keeping secrets, and half of what we see in this film is probably a worst kept secret of a film ever, despite them trying to cover it up. Even so, that being considered, this is my full spoiler review. If you have not seen Spider-Man No Way Home and do not want the film spoiled for you, do not watch this video. This is your cutoff point. This is your last warning. If you have seen the film, or you just don't care about spoilers, in which case that's madness, you probably should care a little bit more about spoilers. But if that is the case, feel free to carry on watching, and let's get into it. So as I said at the start, Sony suck at making trailers for these kinds of films. They suck at keeping secrets, which is a little bit of a shame. Despite the fact that in their trailers they obviously tried to hide some very obvious facts about other Spider-Men that are also in this film. Big spoiler at the top of the video, yes, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, or as I've been calling them, Tobey Maguire-Man and Spider-Man Drew Garfield, are indeed in this film. They do make an appearance, they are a significant force within the film. They're actually a big part of the plot, which is maybe the surprise that came from this film. I was fully expecting them to be part of the climax of the movie and kind of only really come in the final third act finale fight scene, but actually they're in it for a lot more than that, and I really enjoyed that. It gave us a chance to see this dynamic and interaction between three people who are all Peter Parker, but all from different universes. They're all kind of similar, but all kind of different, and that's what makes the interactions great. But I am getting a little bit ahead of myself. As I said in my spoiler-free review, the plot itself revolves around identity, and the fact that everyone that knows who Spider-Man is, and that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, the fact that they know that draws them from what Doctor Strange has done into this universe, which means that we do get villains like Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard. We are obviously one shy of it being a Sinister Six. It's more like the Furious Five. But they all seem to have come from a point in their own respective timelines where they were about to fight Spider-Man and lose. Doctor Strange says that they all die fighting Spider-Man, which obviously is true for a few of them, but not all of them. In fact, Sandman and the Lizard both definitively survived from what we saw in their films. You can only maybe make a judgment call that this happened at a point that we see off-screen later on, but for the most part, he does say that a few of them die fighting Spider-Man. Which is weird because Dr. Octopus actually says when he sees Norman Osborn as Green Goblin, I know for a fact that guy is dead. This is how he died. So it's weird that they've been extracted from their individual timelines at a point where they were about to lose to Spider-Man. But this does prompt Peter to come up with the plan of not just sending them back to their respective universes, but actively trying to help fix them before they go back. And it's this that, to me, felt the most like what I was hoping to see Peter Parker try and do. Yes, it is about responsibility. Yes, it is about being a hero. But it's not always just about protecting the girlfriend or protecting Aunt May or stopping the bad guy's plan from hurting any more people. What Peter Parker does actively try and do, canonically in comic book lore, is help the other people. He doesn't just try to lock up bad guys, he does try to help cure them on numerous occasions. He's gone, what can I do to stop this person being the person that they are, rather than just stop what they're trying to do. This is what really felt like Peter Parker to me. Now, as also said in my spoiler-free review, there was reasoning behind his tech suit use. Well, the reason he uses it in this film is because he gets neon paint dumped on his regular one, so he can't go around wearing a paint-stained suit. But in the fight where he's wearing it and he's facing off against Doc Ock, it's actually proving really useful. He can actively go toe-to-toe with Dr. Octopus, doing exactly what Doc Ock can do with his extra arms. This is the only time that Peter Parker Spider-Man has been able to really do that. It kind of makes it more along the lines of an even playing field that way. Sure, Spider-Man has fought Doc Ock so many times without those arms, but it does even the playing field a little bit. But the most interesting part is that, as we saw in the trailer, because again, Sony suck at keeping secrets, some of the nanites from Peter's tech suit do infect Dr. Octopus's arms. They kind of graft onto it, but the trick here is that it kind of pairs with his suit as almost like a Bluetooth device. And obviously, yeah, it's like, well, why couldn't his suit have done that all of the rest of the times with other things? Sure, okay, it's a very sudden, oh, he can just do that now. But it does make sense. It's technology. It's advanced technology. If the nanites get onto it and they can just take control of it, like Peter Parker can do now, it's a great method for just winning that fight. He doesn't necessarily have to take all of the punches and then dish out the punches again. Why not just pair the tech with his tech suit and immobilize Dr. Octopus's arms? Great idea. And when I said in my spoiler-free review that there is a lot of fan service at work here, I was not lying. There is a lot of fan service at work, but it's to the betterment of the entire film. It does in fact get encapsulated in one perfect line where, after being captured, Norman Osborn does say the immortal words of, "I'm something of a scientist myself." That, my friends, is the power of meme culture at work in a fan service film. Now, one of the biggest plot points to address in this movie that had huge ramifications after this point for the rest of the film and potentially for the entire future of Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the death of Aunt May. Now, Aunt May dies sort of at the hands of Green Goblin, but he makes it out like it was Peter Parker's fault that that happened because she was there in the first place, which is maybe a little bit tentative. I might not personally agree with that, but ultimately her death weighs incredibly heavily on Peter Parker's shoulders. And it does for the audience as well, because it's an unexpected move. It does give the impression that perhaps in this universe, Uncle Ben never actually existed, which by proxy means that these whole 3 films were a lead-up to Spider-Man becoming the Peter Parker and the Spider-Man that we actively recognize throughout the entire Marvel canon. So it's less that we weren't given an origin story for Spider-Man when he first appears in Civil War, and more that all 3 of these films were the development of the Spider-Man character that we most actively recognize. Spider-Man Homecoming was about Peter Parker learning what it's like and what it means to be a hero. Spider-Man Far From Home was about Peter Parker stepping up and accepting that role of being a hero, despite feeling that he can't live up to the expectations of what's necessary of him. But you see him through that film step into that role as a hero, accepting the title of what goes along with it. And No Way Home now is about accepting the responsibilities and repercussions of being a hero and everything that goes along with it. The repercussions, the sacrifices, the responsibilities, and it's at that point that you kind of realize these whole 3 films were developing Peter Parker as the growth into the Spider-Man that is going to carry on that title throughout the rest of the MCU movies. Now, another big theme that's at work in No Way Home is the theme of redemption, and I really like seeing this. So there is a lot of redemption at work. So firstly, Peter helps Doc Ock first out of all of the other villains, and replaces the inhibitor chip with something else that will allow him to take control over his arms. And that gives him his redemption, because that means that Doc Ock comes back in the third act to help and aid, and gets that moment with Tobey Maguire-Man, and seeing him grown up, and seeing that he's developed into this whole other person. They get that redemption moment together. Andrew Garfield gets his redemption by saving MJ when she's falling in a way that he couldn't save Gwen Stacy. And Tobey Maguire-Man gets his redemption from stopping Norman Osborn being impaled by his own glider, admittedly by a very angry MCU Peter Parker, which in turn means that he saves Norman Osborn, which in turn means that he would never turn Harry against him, and he gets to keep his best friend, so he gets his redemption as well. Which all ultimately builds into the fact that most of these characters get their fix, or get their redemption, other than Peter Parker in our current MCU universe, who ends up with nothing. And this is probably the most Peter Parker-y thing to happen in the film. He realizes he has to sacrifice the people that still know who he is. He has to sacrifice their knowledge of him even existing in their lives. So by being the hero and giving everyone their fix and giving everyone their chance at redemption, Peter Parker winds up with nothing. He ends up as if he never existed in this universe. No one knows who he is. There is no record of him. He winds up sacrificing everything and winds up alone. And that is the most Peter Parker thing that can possibly happen, is that he ends up with the short end of the stick. Now, this part of the storyline is obviously based a little more around One More Day and the Brand New Day comic book arcs, which kind of followed on from him revealing his identity in the Civil War comic book arcs. So you can see how this is a logical progression from the end of Far From Home, where he had his identity revealed to the world. It still kind of sucks for him because it ultimately changes the entire status quo of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and for him as a person within that universe. No one knows him. He now no longer has access to any of his old suits. He can't make anything that's tech-based because all of his Tony Stark stuff is gone. No one knows that he was ever friends with Tony Stark. No one ever knows that he was in the Avengers. So it's kind of back to the original square one of Spider-Man being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man with no one knowing his identity at all. But I do have to say, the fact that he makes a suit at the end, and it is the most traditional Spider-Man suit that we have seen so far, I really liked seeing that. I almost didn't get enough of a glimpse of that suit. I wanted a lot more of that suit, so I'm probably gonna have to do some deep internet dives to scour and find some shots of that suit. Now, the post-credits scene, of which there are two, but one of them, let's face it, it's a trailer for Doctor Strange in this multiverse of madness. So maybe you don't need to watch that unless you're a huge Doctor Strange fan. But the first mid-credits sequence is Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock from the Venom films, still in that bar in Mexico, in the hotel that he got transported to when there was a dimensional shift, trying to figure out and talk to the bartender and get his head around the superheroes that are in this Marvel Cinematic Universe that he's found himself in, before ultimately getting transported back into his own, but not before leaving a tiny fragment of the Venom symbiote, which starts kind of molding and stretching. So obviously, maybe there's gonna be a little bit of the black suit Spider-Man in the next film. Let's hope that that gets seen. But it did maybe clue me in as to the fact that maybe we're not going to see the Tom Hardy Venom from that universe fighting and squaring off with Spider-Man, but a whole new Venom. Unless, of course, what happens is that he gets his black suit, the Tom Hardy Venom makes his way back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in some other form, and then that part of the symbiote reattaches to his Venom suit to give him even more abilities and give him the iconic white spider symbol across his chest. I don't know. It's all just theories. I'm getting way ahead of myself at this point. But overall, what I would say is some of my favourite points of this film is seeing the interactions between Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland Spider-Man, who I do now believe encapsulates everything about Peter Parker that I like as a character. I literally said after my rewatch of Spider-Man 2, the day before seeing this film, if there isn't an interaction scene where they're all asking Tobey Maguire how he can produce his own Spider-Man webs from his wrist and how he does that and how they didn't get that as their power set, if there isn't the discussion between them about that, whole film is a write-off. Lo and behold, there it is. And some of these interactions between them were literally everything I hoped they would be. They maybe drew out the jokes a little bit in some of these scenes. I felt like the discussion points went on quite a long time. But again, I think that's part of them paying the fan service to the people coming to see this film, because if they'd cut it right down so it was hardly anything in there, people would be going, I wanted to see more of these interactions. So I feel like we got enough of these interactions for people to not go, I didn't see enough of them interacting as Peter Parker and as themselves. But overall, as I said in my spoiler-free review, this film has a lot of heart. Bring your tissues. It has a lot of action. Get ready to be on the edge of your seat. It has a lot of humor. There are some great moments in this movie that just encapsulate the whole Spider-Man vibe that you want out of the film. But are there any things, any points, any Easter eggs that I might have missed that you caught that I didn't discuss in this spoiler review? All comments are welcome in the comment section below. Let's talk spoiler nerdy. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you would like to see some more, you can click right here to subscribe and see some more funky, fresh videos from yours truly. And until that point, do not tell me that the interaction between MJ and the old guy in the donut shop at the end was not written as a Stan Lee cameo. But let's discuss.